Welcome on in to another episode of Nate Hit the Foul Pole. This is our 2020 MLB Draft Preview Show, and we are happy to be welcomed in by our guest, Jim Callis. Jim, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Jim is a senior writer at MLB.com for MLB Pipeline. You can also listen to him on the MLB Pipeline podcast, and you can follow him at Jim Callis. So, Jim, this is kind of like crazy times, especially in terms of the MLB draft. We are shortening the draft this year to 5 rounds. There's talk in the next few years to shortening it to 20 rounds. How do you think that the 5 rounds will affect high schoolers' draft position, or maybe how many high school players will be drafted this year?
I do think, we're going to find out, but my sense is I feel like the 5-round draft this year, I think will look fairly similar to what the first 5 rounds looked like last year in a 40-round draft. I still think you're going to see a number of high schoolers get paid. You may see fewer high schoolers in the first 5 rounds, but I think it's less a reflection of teams are being conservative, as this is a really deep year for college talent, especially on the pitching side. But last year, I think if I got my numbers right, there were 40 players, high school players, who got $600,000 or more in the first 5 round, and there were maybe 4 who got it after the 5th round. And I still think you're going to see, maybe it won't be 40, maybe it'll be closer to 30, but I still think you'll see that a lot of the best high school players will get paid. You'll have some guys who want to go to college, and they will. There's always going to be some unsignable high school guys, but I don't think it's going to be too radically different. We're not going to see, for instance, in last year's draft and in past years, you've seen teams, a lot of teams go crazy on college seniors in rounds 7 through 10 to save money for their bonus pools to give to high school guys. I don't think we're going to see that. You may see some college juniors get squeezed, in the 4th or 5th round a little bit as it gets close to, hey, you might not get drafted and then you can only get 20,000. You may see some of that, but I think all in all, it's probably going to look, I would expect it to look fairly similar to what it looked like last year, just through the first 5 rounds.
Yeah, so Jim, looking at the Orioles as a team going into the draft, what do you see for them at number 2? I know you've written about, Austin Martin and Asa Lacy being the possibilities, but what's the latest? Have you heard any more news on this front?
No, what's weird is, and again, I think it's just the times we're dealing with where you don't have guys playing games and maybe stock. Not that the stock at the top of the draft is super volatile, but nobody's played in 2 months. So it's not like, hey, Austin Martin, just went, 2 for 12 at the SEC tournament in front of a bunch of guys. He's slipping a little bit or something. There's none of that. Or, Austin Martin went, 8 for 10 and maybe he'll go number 1. I do feel pretty strongly, although not like it's finalized, the Tigers will take Spencer Torkelson, Arizona State first baseman, at number 1. I think if they didn't take Torkelson, I think the Orioles would jump on him at number 2, but assuming he's gone, I think the pick in all likelihood comes down to Austin Martin, who's played outfield and third base this year at Vanderbilt, and Asa Lacy, who's the left-hander at Texas A&M, who's the best pitcher in this year's draft. There's always talk at the top of the draft, team might cut a deal or do this or that, and look what the Astros did with Carlos Correa when Michael Elias was there. I don't think they're going to get cute at 2. There's been talk that they might look to save money at 2 and then go, really big at picks 30 or 39. But they already have the highest bonus pool of any team. They already have a second pick before anybody else has a second pick, and a third pick before anybody else has a third pick. I don't think they're going to get cute at 2. I think they're going to take the guy who they think is the best player. I feel like it's like Lacy versus Martin is a lot closer than Martin versus Torkelson for most teams right now. I guess if I was projecting it right now at this moment, I would probably still project Austin Martin to go number 2 to the Orioles, but I feel less certain about that than I do about Torkelson going number 1 to the Tigers.
Yeah, and you talk about us having the largest draft pool. Do you think the Orioles could go all in for a high schooler such as Nick Bitsgo, who could fall to possibly 30 or 39 and spend all that money?
Yeah, I don't know if they'd spend all of it, but they have so much money in their bonus pool, they're going to be in good shape. If I think their bonus pool, I don't have it in front of me. I want to say is like 13.6 million, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just making numbers up here as we go. So let's say they take Austin Martin at 2. Now, on one hand, you could argue it's 13.9 million actually. So if they take Austin Martin at 2, that slot's worth about 7.8 million. Now, on one hand, I had somebody tell me today, I'm hearing Torkelson and Martin want over slot. Well, okay, but the reality is, if I take Austin Martin and I offer him $7 million as a number 2 pick, is Austin Martin going to turn down $7 million? I doubt it. But let's say, even if he costs $7.5 million at 2, the Orioles still have $6.4 million. So you could maybe take a Nick Bitsgo, who's fascinating. He's one of the best high school pitchers in the draft, but he reclassified to this draft from next year's draft in January. So guys really haven't borne down on him. He's from Pennsylvania, so he didn't pitch. He had a bullpen workout for teams in early March. So like where he's going to fit in the draft will be interesting. But yeah, I mean, you could, and again, I'm just making up numbers here. Let's say I give Martin, $7 or $7.5 million. I could give Nick Bitsgo at 30 or somebody else, $4 to $4.5 million. And because of my spending power, I can also let the agents know, hey, we're willing to do this. So then they can put out a big number and try to make the guy fall to me at 30. And if I do that, then I still have $2.4 million for my next 4 picks. Now, you'd have to pare them down a little bit. You wouldn't be paying full slot on all those guys, but you could still get 4 pretty good players for $2.4 million. And again, I'm just making up numbers. Maybe Martin gets 7, and Bitsgo or whoever gets 4 at 30, and then you have $3 million for your last 4 picks. So they're in a position where they can do a lot of different things. And I don't think. I just don't think you get cute. I don't think they have to look for somebody to take $5.5 or $6 million at 2 to go big at 30. They have enough money where they can do that and still get whoever they think the best player at number 2 is.
Yeah, and then with picks 30 and 39, where do you think the Orioles will go? Could they take a pitcher or possibly, just the best player available?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's best player available. Now, you may have a target, and again, because they have spending power, they may have a specific guy that they hope that they can make fall there. But I think one. Again, I mean, the Orioles have so many needs. It's not like, hey, if we get a third baseman, we're a pennant contender, in 2021 type of thing. One, they have a lot of needs, and 2, I think it's pretty much best player available usually anyway. You may, a team may say, oh, our system is strong in this, so we, are going to try to shore up a weakness. We might emphasize that a little bit. And then 3, you just don't know who's going to be there. I mean, I know I probably spend more time than the Orioles do worrying about exactly who's going in the first 29 picks. And you just don't know. There's so much uncertainty. Even like picks 20 to 29, there's probably 20 or 25 guys who could go in those 10 spots. So you can't plan specifically for a specific guy. Like I said, maybe if a Nick Bitsgo, we're just guessing here, puts out a huge number, you might feel pretty good that like, yeah, he might be there at 30. But in terms of who exactly is going to be there, you just really don't know.
Yeah, and then, when the Orioles selected a pitcher last year, it wasn't until the 8th round. So do you think that could, come into play this year and they would, select a pitcher maybe in the 5th or, kind of late?
Well, I mean, I do think, too, this draft, I mean, the strength of this draft, the greatest strength is college pitching. So, I mean, I think it's very possible, not that you draft off the consensus, but that once we take the first 29 picks off the board, when the Orioles pick 30 and they pick 39, that like your next 10 guys on the board or the consensus board might be 7 college pitchers. So I would be very surprised if the Orioles don't pick a couple pitchers. I think they have 6 picks. If they went 6 hitters, that would surprise me, I think, this year, especially given the strength of the draft.
So, Jim, is there a player in this year's draft? And obviously, we have a extremely limited sample size for this year, but in past years, is there a player in this draft that's had poor production but will get drafted higher, because of his tools? Like a player like Cameron Meisner comes to mind from last year's draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think the guy, he's a wild card. I don't know that I'd say he's definitely going to go in the first round. I mean, Casey Martin in Arkansas is one of the best college athletes in the draft. I mean, he's close to a 80 runner on the 20 to 80 scouting scale. And he's got, probably, 60 to 65 raw power. But he came into the year with some swing and miss concerns, and he got off to a terrible start. He played a little bit better the 4th week of the college season before the season abruptly ended. But, it's not that people are going to draft off our board, but like he's number 30 on our list. And I don't know what the Orioles think of Casey Martin in particular. I mean, I know they're probably more analytic than most teams, and so the strikeout rate probably concerns them. But like Casey Martin's a guy who at the beginning of the year you would say, oh, there's no chance he's there at 30. And he could be. You know, there's a high school third baseman from Georgia named Jordan Walker, who some people thought had a chance to be the best high school position player in the draft this year. And, you know, that didn't quite happen. But, I mean, he's 6'5", 220, you know, big power. Maybe he winds up at right field. But, again, that's a guy who you probably were thinking wasn't going to get to 30. You know, and he didn't so much play badly this year because, I mean, his high school season barely got started. But, I mean, he's another guy who could be in play with pick 30 or 39.
So a little bit more of a broader question for you. Has there been any chatter whatsoever of expanding college rosters next year due to COVID? Because I know with only 5 rounds, there's going to be an influx of talent into these college ranks.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about the influx of talent because I think if you have a lot of college juniors go back, teams aren't going to have more scholarships. And I think you're going to have incoming freshmen who thought they were going to have scholarships. A bunch of them find out in August their team doesn't have room for them. I think you may see the NCAA loosen the 35-man roster limit. Like that may get loosened. I can't imagine in this economy. We've already seen a couple schools drop sports. College sports could get really ugly. There might not be college sports next spring if we don't have college football with fans in the stands. I can't imagine there's any way that schools, even if the NCAA said, go ahead and do what you want, I don't think schools are going to give out more scholarships. And so I think you're going to have schools with roster crunches. So I don't, I think it's going to be really tough to see what happens with that. And I forgot. So I was just talking about the roster. What was the other part of the question? You were asking about whether they'd ease the roster limit. They might, but I don't think they're going to ease the scholarship limit, and that's going to be a real problem for a lot of kids.
Yeah, and then one last question before we get into our rapid-fire player questions. Is there a player in this year's draft who you would categorize as a Callis darling? I know you're a big fan of Mackenzie Gore, and just, if there was a player in this year's draft like that.
I don't think there's anybody close. I mean, I've heard such good things about Spencer Torkelson, where guys are saying he might be the best offensive player to come out of the draft since Mark Teixeira. But I mean, he's a consensus number 1 prospect, so I don't think he would qualify as like me going out on a limb. I guess a guy who I think is going to be pretty good, and he might not even get drafted this year because I'm not sure he'll be signable. But I really like Tanner Witt, who's a projectable high school pitcher from Texas. We've got him 53rd on our list. He's 6'6". His stuff was starting to pick up right before the high school season shut down. He's the son of Kevin Witt, who's a former first-round pick. And I just don't know if teams could pay him enough to get him away from Texas at this point because he's still – there's a lot of projection involved with him. It's not like he's throwing 95 regularly. But, like, for a big guy, he's got good control. He's got a good repertoire. I think this guy's going to wind up being a first-round pick after 3 years at Texas if he doesn't get signed this year. So he's kind of the guy who I think I probably like – more than most. I really do like Tanner Witt, but he's not quite in that Mackenzie Gore class where I'm saying like I would take Tanner Witt 1-1 overall like I would have with Mackenzie Gore.
Yeah, perfect. And then we will now move on to our rapid fire. So basically, Jim, we're going to give you a player in this year's draft, probably around the top 50 or so. Give our mini scouting report, and then hand it over to you and just hear what you have to say.
Okay.
So the first player is obviously Spencer Torkelson. We want to talk about him. Best hitting, do you think he's the better hitting prospect than somebody from last year, like an Andrew Vaughn? Where would you rank him?
Yeah, he's better than Vaughn. I mean, I think he's got more power than Vaughn, and not that athleticism is going to be a big part of his game, but he's more athletic than Vaughn. Vaughn's first base only. Torkelson might be able to play left field, but I mean, I did a story a couple of weeks ago where I asked GMs and scouting directors and cross checkers, decision maker types, to Torkelson versus Martin, who would you take? And I suspected Torkelson would win, but he won 29-5. It was a blowout. And I had one scouting director who's been doing this for a long time said that he's the most big league ready hitter he's seen in the draft ever. I thought he could go straight to the big leagues. I had another a cross checker say that he'd put 70 hits, 70 power on the 20 to 80 scale on Torkelson, and he might be light. I think he's probably the best. I mean, the consensus seems to be he's the best offensive player to come out of the draft, probably since Mark Teixeira back in 2001. I mean, you look at a guy like Chris Bryant, who out-homered 3/4 of the teams in Division I his draft year, but there were some swing and miss concerns with him. He still went number 2. I mean, guys loved him, but you don't have those concerns with Torkelson. I mean, the power jumps out the most, but he's also a really gifted hitter who really controls the strike zone. So, I mean, he'd be great for Orioles to get it too, but I don't think they're going to get a shot at him.
Yeah, and for the projected number 2 guy in Austin Martin, great on-base skills, great speed. He can play all around, infield and outfield, decent arm. What do you kind of see from him? Where do you think he's going to end up, and what's his production going to be year to year?
Yeah, I think he's the best pure hitter in the draft. I think that raw power is probably only average, but I think he's one of those guys who's such a gifted hitter that he'll get to most of it. So I think you're looking at a guy who's probably like a 300 hitter, maybe 20 homers a year, 15, 20 homers a year. There are some throwing questions on him. I think the left side of the infield is probably a little bit of a stretch. I think it probably comes down to center field versus second base. I mean, you may run him out there at shortstop or third base to see what it looks like. If I had to guess, I mean, I think teams are all over the place a little bit on where he winds up. I think he probably I think the best guess is he winds up being a really good offensive second baseman. I don't necessarily know that I quite buy third base or shortstop, and I'd rather play him on the dirt than in center. So I think he winds up being a really good second baseman. I think he could definitely play up the middle somewhere.
So what about a guy like Zach Veen, the high school outfielder? It looks like he has a similar build to Cody Bellinger and, consistent tools across the board.
Yeah, he I think he's got more power than Cody Bellinger had at the same stage of their careers. Cody had kind of a flat swing. He was more of a contact-oriented guy, and that didn't really change until after he was in pro ball for a couple of years. And then, I mean, he made it look a lot easier than it's supposed to be. It's kind of like, okay, I'm going to use my legs more and add some launch angle and try to drive the ball more, and then he became the best power hitting prospect in baseball. But Zach's the best high school position player in this draft. I think he's the best all around offensive player on the high school crop. I think he's the best bet hit for power and average. Chance maybe he plays center field. I think he probably fits more in right field in the long run. He's going to go really, really good. I think he probably goes. If I had to pick a team, it would be Toronto at 5 right now, and if he doesn't go 5, then I think he goes in that 7 to 9 range.
Yeah, so if you look at a guy like Reed Detmers from Louisville, what separates him from a guy like Asa Lacy or Emerson Hancock, who's one of the top pitchers in the draft?
For Detmers, I think his polish is what stands out for him. Lacy and Hancock have more of that kind of premium, frontline starter stuff, the like mid-90s fastball and nasty breaking stuff. And not a knock on Reed. Reed's more of a 90-94 guy, although he has, better fastball command than those two guys, I think, on a more consistent basis. His curveball can be a plus pitch at times, but it's more of a good pitch than one that's really going to buckle your knees. He's got an effective changeup. He just is probably the higher floor than those two guys, just because he throws so many strikes. I don't know. I mean, you could argue Hancock has a higher floor, I guess, because Hancock throws a lot of strikes and he's got better stuff. But I just think Detmers, I don't know you'd necessarily say he's going to be a number 1 or 2 starter, but you feel pretty good about him being a number 3 or at worst a number 4. He can really, really pitch. He's got good mound presence. Even when he gets tired in the later innings, maybe his fastball dips a little bit, he can still beat you when he's throwing 89 miles an hour in the 7th inning. So it's the polish, I think, that really stands out for him.
Another guy I want to talk about is Austin Hendricks. He is ranked in your latest mock draft, going 12th overall to the Cincinnati Reds. He's a high school outfielder, and I've read that he's had a consistent 100-mile-per-hour exit velocity.
Yeah, he's got probably the best usable. Sorry, my golden retrievers are hungry, and I think somebody's coming in our front door, so they're going nuts. But Hendrick is he's got the best usable power on the high school side. I think Blaze Jordan probably has a little bit more pure power. I think Hendrick gets to it a little bit better in games, at least he has to this point. I've seen him crush a lot of fastballs. I haven't seen, I think he's got some adjustments to make to breaking balls and change-ups. I saw him struggle with those a little bit last summer. He kind of fits that classic right field profile, but you're looking at a guy who, whatever team takes him, and he will go in the top, 10, 15 picks, is projecting this is going to be a guy who you're hoping and you feel like is probably a 30-plus home run guy in the long run.
Yeah, Nick Bitsgo, we talked about earlier, you expect to drop possibly to the Orioles at number 30, as you wrote in an article before. You know, he has a power fastball, some pretty decent breaking stuff. Why is the reason do you think that he would drop that low?
It's just tough because with Bitsco, like I said, he reclassified. So he was going to be in the class of 2021 until January. So nobody really scouted this guy last summer with an eye that he was going to be in this year's draft. And he's from Pennsylvania, so they didn't get a high school season this year. He did a bullpen workout in early March. And I mean, you could argue he's right there with Mick Abel and Jared Kelly as the best high school pitchers in the draft. High school right-handers never go as high in the draft as they're ranked in the media because teams are wary of the track record of high school righties, although there have been some really good ones too. So I think the fact that you couldn't really scout Bitsco is tough, but the upside's huge. I think the reason I think he could go to the Orioles is I think it's for teams, unless you're picking at the end of the first round, it's almost easier to take Nick Bitsco with your second pick. So you're not letting everything ride on Nick Bitsco because you didn't really get a chance to scout him like you normally would. It's easier to take him with your second pick than it is with your first. Now, I mean, I could see somebody, like maybe the Dodgers make a run, but the problem is for the teams at the end of the first round, if you don't have extra picks, Nick Bitsco might want, 80 or 90% of your bonus pool, and then what are you going to do the last 4 rounds? So he's very, very tough.
What about a guy like Garrett Crochet coming out of Tennessee? He's had some injury risk, in the past, and he's kind of a imposing big guy. And he also could surpass R.A. Dickey as the highest drafted volunteer pitcher.
Yeah, he's a wild card too. Because with Crochet, he's a guy who coming into the year, coming into the fall, was a guy who was probably, I'd say, second round pick. He was good, not great stuff, probably second round pick. And then in the fall, he was unbelievable. I mean, he looked like he had top 5 pick stuff. I mean, he was 91, 95 in the spring. He was 96 to 100 in the fall. He's got good spin rates. His slider was just a wipeout pitch. He even showed a well above average changeup. I mean, he looked great. So everybody's really excited about him. And then. And I think it was really just a precaution. He had some shoulder soreness at the beginning of the season. Again, nobody knew what was going to happen with the coronavirus. I think Tennessee's attitude was, let's go slow. We'll hold him out for 3 weeks, then we'll turn him loose. Well, with the way the season worked out, so he didn't pitch first 3 weeks. They made 1 appearance, 3 1/3 innings, and then boom, the season's over. So I don't think anybody's worried about his health. I think people feel like he's healthy. He looked great in those 3 1/3 innings. He kind of flashed stuff he showed in the fall. But what you were hoping was like, okay, we're going to see that fall stuff all spring over 14-week regular season, and you didn't get it. So based on the best you've ever seen Garrett Crochet, you could take him in the top 4 or 5 picks. But you've only seen that in fall ball and for 3 1/3 innings this spring. So, like if you told me. I think he's probably going in the teens more than in the top 10. But like if you told me just on talent he went in the top 5, I could see that. But he's a real wild card for people.
Yeah, he's definitely someone that I think really didn't benefit from the season getting shut down. Maybe had time to prove himself a little bit and never got the chance. So it's kind of too bad because he really could have been a higher pick. You look at a guy like Carmen Lodzinski, and he's a guy who has one of the best 2-seam fastballs I've ever seen. I mean, insane break on it. Control issues. Is that what really separates him from the top pitchers in this draft?
Yeah, you broke up for 1 second. I missed the name. You were.
Carmen Lodzinski.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's. I think he probably goes in the middle of the first round somewhere too. He's another guy who really hasn't pitched a lot either because, he, even in high school his senior year he had a torn fingernail, so he didn't pitch a ton as a high school senior. Guys were on him back then, and then last year he was going to be South Carolina's #1 starter. And he broke his left foot in his 3rd outing and missed the rest of the season. Was really good in the Cape. Yeah, he was up to 99 in fall practice. He's got sink and run. It's a real lively fastball. His slider's kind of overtaking his curveball. I mean, he's another guy that probably could have gone higher if he had, he dominated the Cape Cod League. If he'd shown that stuff over a period of 3 months in a normal college season, it probably would have helped him. I still think he goes pretty good. But again, a little bit of a wild card because you just don't have a lot of track record with him.
What about another guy in Pete Crow Armstrong? You have him going 18th to the Diamondbacks in your latest mock. If you would probably ask people a year ago, he might have been like a top 10 pick or so. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, going into the summer, I think he was the most famous high school prospect, and probably the number one high school prospect. And he didn't have a great summer. Bounced back and played better. I think he played well. Team USA, he played well this spring. I think he's boosted his stock. He's not. He's a really good hitter, plus runner, plus defender and center. Not a ton of power projection. I think. Among the high school outfield crop, I think Zach Veen's number one. Then you probably have Hendrick and Robert Hassel and Pete Crow Armstrong might be the fourth guy. Although he's a strong fourth. I think he kind of goes in that probably 15 to 25 range. I think, and again, we're nitpicking guys because they're in the first round. I think if he had more power, if you had a little bit more power projection, you'd rank him higher.
Tanner Burns from Auburn has a blazing fastball, 98 miles per hour. Do you worry about a guy like that who throws that hard in college that, maybe he has some arm injuries down the road?
Well, he's had some physical issues. He had some shoulder tightness. He missed a start last May, and he was kind of limited when Auburn went to Omaha. I do worry about guys who throw consistently, in the upper 90s. You want that on one hand, but it seems like all those guys have problems staying healthy. Now, to be honest, he kind of more sits 92, 95. So I think it's not he's not kind of pushing the red line on the tachometer that much for like some other guys do. So I'm not worried about from that standpoint. He's not the biggest guy in the world. He's 6 feet tall, but he's strong. He's athletic. His stuff has in college and even his high school senior year kind of dipped a little bit toward the end of the year.
So there, Jim.
With SEC pitchers, smaller guys who drew a lot of interest in high school but proved themselves in the SEC, turned down some money in high school. So I'm not. I think there are some durability questions just on his past, but I don't think it's necessarily related just to the pure fastball velocity.
Okay, then we want to wrap up this segment with one final player. This would be Cole Wilcox coming out of University of Georgia. I know he was mentioned, 2 years ago alongside Kumar Rocker when they both come out of high school as the top, neck and neck high school pitchers. What are your thoughts on Cole Wilcox?
Yeah, he's draft eligible sophomore. I think he'll go high enough to sign. The question with him is not the stuff. He has some of the best stuff you'll see in the draft. He'll sit 92, 97 and hit 100 with the fastball with some life on it. Both his changeup and his slider can be plus pitches at times. It's kind of the delivery. There are some starter reliever questions on him. It's kind of a low elbow in the delivery with a long arm action. And he gets hit a little bit more than you'd like, and you would think he should. I think guys see the ball well out of his hand because of that long arm action. But and he's not always consistent with strikes. But he was better this year. Was their soft part of the schedule. I think he probably goes in that 15 to 25 range. He'll be a first round pick. Between him and Hancock, Georgia should have two first round picks in June.
All right, Jim, so let's talk about some of the other guys that, aren't necessarily first-round talents, but could kind of be, in there a little bit. Let's start with Nick Lofton. I think he's a guy who kind of reminds me of Caden Grenier, the Orioles drafted a few years ago. Really good glove and maybe a major league-ready glove, and a guy who can slap the ball around a little bit, not a ton of power. What do you see in him? Is he a guy who you think is, going to go in the, top first, second round?
Yeah, I do. I think it sounds like he might sneak into the end of the first round. I hear his name in that area a lot. I think he's got, the Grenier comparison, it's fair. I think Caden's probably a little bit better defensively, and I think Nick offers a little bit more offense. It's a contact approach, kind of an average runner, very versatile. He played 5 positions on Team USA last year, so I think he's a utility guy if he doesn't hit enough to be a regular. He's more of a floor than a ceiling guy. I think I don't think he's necessarily going to be a guy who's gonna be a catalyst in your lineup or be like a perennial all-star. But I do think you have a pretty good idea of what you're getting out of him, and I'd be very surprised if he is not at least a big leaguer.
So I definitely wanted to bring up this next guy because you can't have a draft preview show and not talk about Blaze Jordan. Who was kind of like, the phenom coming on the scene as a 15-year-old. Do you think if they institute a universal DH, moving forward, do you think that helps his draft position this draft?
I'm sorry, my dogs are shuffling behind me. I missed the name again. Wait, which player?
Blaze Jordan.
Blaze Jordan. Yeah, I think well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, I agree. I mean, there's some defensive questions. He's probably first base only, I think, for most people. I think whoever takes him will probably give him a shot at third base, first base only. But, I mean, maybe for a National League team, you feel a little bit better about drafting him because, but I mean, he's not such a bad athlete that, like, we're not talking like Jack Cust here where you don't even want him playing first. Well, I'm just saying, like, Jack Cust, I remember talking to people about him as an amateur, as a prospect, where, like, you'd put Jack Cust in the outfield because you didn't want him handling balls at first base. The ball was around him too much. Yeah, I think Blaze could play first base okay. So I don't think that's necessarily that big of a difference. Maybe it makes a National League team feel a little bit better about him, but, like, the power, yeah, I mean, he did swing and miss after he reclassified last year and played against older competition on the circuit last year. But, he probably can, in terms of just pure raw power, home run derby, etc., hit the ball as far as anybody in the draft, and somebody will pay him a lot of money, because of that power potential.
Yeah, I think a guy like JT Ginn is really interesting because he was already drafted in the first round, but he might not even go as a first rounder this year. Why do you see the fact that he's dropped? Is it that he's lost a bit of his stuff, or just that he's decided to go to college?
Well, he had Tommy John surgery, and so that's going to hurt him. I mean, I think if he was healthy, he probably would have been in that 10 to 20 range. And what's tricky is he's a draft eligible sophomore. Now, everybody will maintain their current year status if they go back to college. He'll be a sophomore again. But it's just tricky with him because people don't have a great feel. Like, is he going to be signable? Usually, he had Scott Boras in high school, and he still does. And Boras guys typically don't, typically want at least what they turned down in high school, which is kind of going to be tough in a 5-round draft. So I think I just don't know how signable he's going to be. Like, if you offer JT Ginn, say $1.5 million. So, I mean, it's not inconceivable that if his signability is tough, it's a 5-round draft. I don't think there's going to be too many signability. I don't think teams are going to take too many players that they don't know that they're definitely going to sign.
Another guy I wanted to bring up, Jim, with 2 guys left for you. This would be Joe Boyle coming out of University of Notre Dame. You guys on MLB Pipeline have him listed as having an 80 grade fastball, and he did touch 102. What do you think the reasoning is having him like so low? I think he's below 150. Yeah,
he just doesn't throw strikes. I mean, he's barely pitched at Notre Dame. The previous coaching staff didn't use him much because he didn't throw strikes. He threw 27 2/3 innings in his first 2 years at Notre Dame. Those are full seasons. Looked better in the Cape League. He's a monster. He's 6'7", 240. Repeatedly hits 100 miles an hour. As a starter at the Cape, he could sit in the upper 90s for several innings at a time. But there's not a lot of feel for pitching he's shown. It's an upper 80s slider, no real third pitch. I mean, he's intimidating, but he walked 13 guys in 8 1/3 innings this year. He didn't throw enough strikes to start during the 4-week college season. So again, I mean, maybe you try to make him a starter. I mean, you could do that, but I think you feel like this guy's pretty much going to be a reliever, and there's no track record of throwing strikes. It's not a bad athlete. It's not like a horrible delivery. So maybe you can polish him up some. But, the guy throws very hard, but you're probably looking at a reliever. Even if you put him in the bullpen, I mean, if you put him in the rotation to get him innings or hope he could be a starter, I just think that you're almost certainly getting a reliever with him, and then that's why he ranks as low as he does.
Yeah, and the last guy I wanted to talk about is a Division III player, Nick Garcia. He is ranked by MLB Pipeline as the 71st best prospect. What do you see out of him?
Yeah, he's interesting. I mean, it's kind of a truth to, scouts are going to find you no matter where you play. He helped Chapman win the national title last year, was MVP at the D3 College World Series. And he was in the Cape League and pitched well out of the pen. He, he's, kind of 92, 95 up to 97. He's got a mid-80s slider he could turn into a harder cutter. That's a pretty solid pitch. I think the changeup needs work. The control command are okay. I don't think he's a slam dunk starter, but he's got a chance to be a starter. I think that's a possibility for him. And he's very, very interested. I would think he'd go, I would guess, second round, maybe early third round at the latest.
Cool. Yeah, and because this is an Orioles podcast, we did want to wrap up with one Orioles-related question, and this is from the audience, from Justin Labor. He says, how do you see what essentially is a lost season affecting player development on a rebuilding team such as the Orioles?
Yeah, I mean, it stinks. I mean, it's obviously the Orioles were much more about, developing, talent for the future than what was going to happen in the big leagues this year. And it's tough. I mean, I'm just speculating here because nothing's official, and it is more just me thinking out loud. But let's assume that we can have a major league season that starts in July. I would think that we will see some sort of arrangement where you aren't going to bring everybody in, but teams will try to bring in their best prospects, say your best 50 or so prospects, and maybe you have an older team and a younger team, and you have like a 3-month schedule where you're playing at your spring training complex against other teams if possible. And you try, because you need innings. Grayson Rodriguez needs innings. Adley Rutschman needs at bats. I do think one of the things that's interesting to consider is, what do you do? Like for the Orioles, like Ryan Mountcastle was going to make the team at some point anyway. But like, Dean Kramer and Keegan Aiken, do you just, if we have, like there's talk there might be like a 50-man roster because you're not going to have a AAA team per se. You're going to have reinforcements ready. Do you have them on your 50-man roster and you get them innings that way? Do you get a Zach Lothar and a Dean and a Michael Baumann, maybe toward the end of the season, if a minor league season isn't possible, you get them some innings. Do you give at-bats to Yusniel Diaz? It's tough because, and the thing is, at the major league level too, like let's say that what I'm saying happens and you get kind of like half a minor league season in and Grayson Rodriguez gets, 70 innings in. Well, he probably was going to get like 125 this year, in hopes of getting him 150 in 2021. And, and then he's ready for the big leagues at that point. Well, if he only gets 75 innings this year, how many innings can you get him next year? Like 120? I mean, it's kind of really a setback. And, I think, they'll tell you too with hitters, guys need at bats, look, Adley Rutschman is going to be a star. But like Adley Rutschman, the plan was he's probably going to get, 400, 500 plate appearances in the minors this year. And he might only get a couple hundred. And, I think in his case, he probably was going to be ready before the Orioles were ready to win. And then you're going to get into the whole service time issue with him to some extent. But again, I mean, he's losing, a couple hundred at bats or more that you were hoping he'd get. So, it's tough, and I don't think there's a great answer for it. And if we can't play baseball, let's say the major league season doesn't get off the ground, or it's not feasible to do the minor leagues, that especially for the pitchers, it's going to be a huge setback. Because I mean, even if you're working out at home and you have a mound and a catcher, it's not the same as pitching in games and pitching to real hitters, and sometimes pitching without your best stuff. I mean, there are many things. The coronavirus has really harmed baseball in a lot of ways, and player development is one of them.
Well, we certainly appreciate your time. We are definitely for the draft. A little bit.
Yeah, sorry. It's like you're breaking up. I didn't hear anything you just
breaking
said.
up a bit there, Matt. Yeah.
Okay, my bad. I was just saying, we're looking for the time.
Yeah, it's all garbled.
I think what Matt is trying to say. Thanks for your time. Really, really appreciate having you.
Oh yeah,
it's been great.
No, I appreciate it too. Yeah, for some reason you've gone.
Is there anything you would like to plug, Jim?
Oh yeah, it's I just point people to our site MLB Pipeline, our prospect watch. We've got a top 200 draft list. We're doing new. With videos and scouting reports, we have new draft content daily. The great thing about our site, it's all free. Nothing's behind a paywall. All our scouting reports and videos, all of our stories, our chats, our podcasts, everything's free. And then I try to highlight a lot of the stuff at my Twitter feed at Jim Callis MLB, so people can see what we're doing. But yeah, come check out MLB Pipeline because you'll get all kinds of draft stuff, and hopefully at some point we'll have minor league games and prospects to write about again too.
Yeah, you're doing awesome work. Thanks for coming on, Jim.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Good now, buddy?
You're
Can you hear me?
better. You're better.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that'll wrap up the show. Obviously, a good draft talk with Jim. And, he always gives great insight. So,
yeah, he's fantastic. I mean, there's nobody better in the business to talk prospects and draft prospects. He knows the ins and outs of every single guy. So, certainly fantastic to have him on the show for sure.
Appreciate all of our listeners tuning in. We do our show every Friday live on YouTube, so you can catch up before the audio version comes out. If you want to subscribe to our YouTube page, we're also on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and SoundCloud. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.